Mr. Panetta's decision follows a recommendation from the nation's top generals.
In the current year 2024, women have the right to run for political positions, the right to vote, and have the right to apply for a job. But unfortunately, it wasn't always like this. You see, back then, women were supposed to help the maintenance of a house and take care of their child instead of getting a job. And there was one problem. The majority of the women did not like to stay home and take care of the maintenance of the house. They wanted to actually do something in life and get a job or run for political positions. And even worse, very few women wanted to step up and negotiate with the government to get their rights. On the other hand, there were women, including Susan B. Anthony, that were willing to negotiate. There were many questions. Will women get their rights? Will the government approve a woman? And that's why today we're going to explore how women went from stay-home cleaners to office workers.
It shall be my work this evening to prove to you that in thus voting, I not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizens' rights guaranteed to me and all United States citizens.
Were allowed to vote.
On February 15, 1820, Susan B. Anthony was born into a Quaker family in Adams, Massachusetts. She was a precious child that learned how to read and write at just the age of 3 and attended boarding school right after junior high. When Susan was 17, she even started passing out flyers for people to sign her petition for women to have the rights to vote and to end women's suffrage. After Susan went to school in Rochester University, she became an abolitionist and started her career off as an anti-slavery suffragist, where she then leaned towards the fight for women's rights and to end women's suffrage. You might think that it would be easier for women to get their rights, but you see, back then, the government would rather die than to give women their rights. So suffragists like Susan B. Anthony would have to work really hard to get their rights back. Knowing that she would have to work very hard to end women's suffrage, she did something unimaginable. In 1869, Elizabeth Cady Station and Susan B. Anthony formed the National Women's Suffrage Association in Washington, D.C. The NWSA organization hosted many boycotts, protests, and campaigns against slavery and women's suffrage. You see, in Susan's suffragist career, she took many risks for women to get their rights, even if it meant breaking the law. On November 5, 1872, despite knowing it was illegal for women to vote, Susan decided to sneak into a voting station and cast her ballot in the presidential election. The government didn't discover her act until 2 weeks later, when she was arrested and fined $100. But Susan refused to pay the fine, causing the judge to sentence her to 2 days in prison. But you see, the fight for women's rights did not stop. In fact, it only continued with more power and motivation. By the time Susan was released from jail, she quickly hosted a meeting in the NWSA, discussing her plan to convince the government to ratify the future 19th Amendment. After protests, after campaigns, after boycotts, after negotiation, and continuous rallies almost every other day, the government was irritated by the commotion the women were causing, especially when it came to negotiating in court. It seemed like the protesters just would not stop. In fact, this was actually the women's strategy, but the only question is, will the government actually try to ratify the 19th Amendment? In fact, the women protested so much that 24% of the government just gave up and agreed with the women. But 24% was nothing compared to the other 76% of the women that absolutely refused to get the women their rights and to let the 19th Amendment be ratified. But all this was about to change. Susan noticed something. The United States government prioritizes the respect for the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and most importantly, the Declaration of Independence. And in the Declaration of Independence, it states, "We the people." It also states that we are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. And this didn't make sense, since women had less rights than men did, and it clearly states in the Constitution that people have unalienable rights. So of course, after she discussed with the NWSA, Susan, with the help of other abolitionists, started protesting and posted flyers of how the Declaration